Tesla reported earnings last night. The stock is up 7% today. Now, I listened to the earnings call last night, also spent several hours digging through that. On this video today, I'm going to share some of the highlights. I'm going to give you some specific quotes from Elon Musk from the earnings call. We're also going to talk about Tesla from a high level. We're going to talk about valuation, and we're going to look at a chart, look at some technical analysis. All right, so the headline, Tesla grows revenue 42%, but automotive margins decline. Now, in this video, I'm actually going to show you some pros and cons of the video. So I'm going to give you bear and bull thesis. I'm not here to tell you, I'm not here to pump the stock or tell you to buy it. I am a bull on Tesla. I do own the shares. I know a lot of people either love it or hate it, but I'm going to give you the facts here today and let you make your own decision. But Tesla grows revenue 42%. Now, adjusted earnings, we're going to talk about this here. Earnings per share, $227. This is adjusted. Now, they actually sold 75% of their Bitcoin holdings, which we'll get to here later in the video. This was versus $1.81 expected. Revenue was 17, well, actually a little bit under 17, 16.93 billion. The expectation was 17.1 billion. So that was a slight miss. Now, this is key. We're going to talk about this later when we talk about the pros and cons. Automotive gross margin came in at 27.9%, down from 32.9% last quarter and 28.4% a year ago. Now that makes sense. We've had supply chain issues, things are more expensive. They've also been raising the price of their cars significantly over the last several months. If you haven't noticed, the prices have been going higher and higher and higher. And this was talked about on the earnings call as well. Elon Musk hopes that inflation subsides, that commodity prices start lower by the end of this year, and that hopefully they can actually decrease the price of Tesla, of their vehicles. Now, whether or not that happens is up for speculation. It sounds good, it's a nice story, but it does make sense why they're raising their prices, because at the end of the day, they're a business and they're trying to be profitable and they've got these numbers they're trying to compete with. So if they don't raise their prices and all of a sudden the gross margins come in way lower than this 27.9%, investors freak out and the stock sells off. Now here's Tesla revenues by segment. I think this one's really key. So you look at 2018, back then, a lot of people thought they were going bankrupt, that Tesla was going out of business. It was a meme stock. Now here we are, it's moving the markets, right? So total revenues by segment, we've got automotive is the light blue color, services is the black color, and then the yellow is the energy generation and storage, solar. And they had some record numbers on their solar for this quarter. Now, when you think of services and other, something we'll talk about later too is FSD. And this is what distinguishes Tesla from really an automotive manufacturer and something more than that, right? A software company kind of mixed together with as a manufacturer, as an EV company, right? The company generated $344 million in regulatory credits. Now, this is something that gets a lot of speculation and I guess not speculation, but controversy. If these credits go away, this could impact the business. But the business has grown so much now, we're talking about billions of dollars. These are nice to have, but they don't necessarily move the company one way or the other like they would have maybe several years ago, right? So Elon Musk on earnings call Wednesday said Tesla's new factory outside of Berlin surpassed 1,000 cars per week in June. Now, one thing to note is that these new gigafactories, they're also inefficient, which is going to hurt some of those margins as well. They talked about that on the earnings call, but Berlin surpassed 1,000 cars per week in June. He expects the company's new factory in Austin, Texas, to exceed the 1,000 per week milestone in the next few months. So towards the end of the year, they're hoping to be firing on all cylinders. I've got some more data to share on that later in the video. They've grown its charging infrastructure more than its store and service centers, reporting 709 store and service locations for the quarter, 3,971 supercharger locations. This is 36,165 total supercharger connections in the second quarter. Those numbers represented 19% growth. This got a lot of controversy. As the end of Q2, we have converted approximately 75% of our Bitcoin purchases into fiat currency. Conversions in Q2 added $936 million of cash to our balance sheet. Now, I saw a lot on Twitter about people talking about how this impacts free cash flow. Of course, this does not impact free cash flow, okay? We're talking about cash on the balance sheet. Overall, the company's cash and cash equivalents increased by $847 million during the quarter. One thing I did note, though, is the interest that they made on their cash wasn't very good at all. It could have been much better. Tesla made waves, so a lot of people were kind of freaking out. I'm going to give you a quote here, what Elon Musk said about Bitcoin and why they sold it.
Yeah, actually, it should be mentioned that the reason we sold a bunch of our Bitcoin holdings was that we were uncertain as to when the COVID lockdowns in China would alleviate. So it was important for us to maximize our cash position given the uncertainty of the COVID lockdowns in China. we are certainly open to increasing our Bitcoin holdings in future. So this should not be taken as some verdict on Bitcoin. It's just that we were concerned about overall liquidity for the company given COVID shutdowns in China. And we have not sold any of our Dogecoin.
We still have it.
We still have our Dogecoin.
With 2 new factories now standing in Texas and outside of Berlin, Germany, Tesla has kept its soft guidance for 50% average annual growth in vehicle deliveries over a multi-year horizon. They also asked about the Cybertruck on the call, and Elon Musk said that they hope to be delivering Cybertrucks by the middle of 2023. Musk also talked about lithium. He talked about how lithium really is abundant. It's the refining process that's very difficult and that there's basically a lack of. So Musk on the call said the processing of lithium is insane. He encouraged entrepreneurs to enter the lithium refining business. You can't lose. It's a license to print money, basically saying that it has the same margins as software. So cash and cash equivalents, they have $18.3 billion. So that's significant. Wanted to make sure I pointed that out. You look at profitability, 2.5 billion GAAP operating margin, 14.6% operating margin in Q2. Total revenue grew 42% in Q2, 16.9 billion. And it was impacted by growth in vehicle deliveries, increased average selling price, and growth in other parts of the business. Profitability, our operating income improved year over year to $2.5 billion in Q2, resulting in a 14.6% operating margin. You can see some of the items here, raw materials, Bitcoin impairment, there's different things on here, growth in vehicle deliveries and so on. Cash, we already talked about. Here's some more numbers for you. This was actually pretty significant. So if you look at this, this is showing current Shanghai, 750,000. Now that number, for me, it surprised me. But if you look at like California, 100,000, 550,000, Berlin, 250, Texas, 250. I know they're ramping these production levels up. But Shanghai current, 750,000, over greater than 750,000 for Model 3 and Model Y. Our Fremont factory made a record number of vehicles in Q1. We see opportunities for further production rate improvement. In Texas, we have added flexibility to produce vehicles with either a structural battery or a legacy battery pack. The next generation of 4680 battery cell machinery has been installed in Texas. Shanghai, while the Shanghai factory was shut down fully and then partially for the majority of Q2, we entered the quarter with a record monthly production level. Now, part of the impact on gross margins was actually due to costs shutting down and restarting the Shanghai factory. It was mentioned on the call. So recent equipment upgrades will enable us to continue to increase our production rates even further. So that's quite impressive. And then in Europe, thanks to strong production rate improvements towards the end of Q2, our team in Germany produced more than 1,000 Model Y vehicles in a single week. When you look at Texas and you look at Berlin, these factories are newer, have inefficiencies. That's hurting gross margin. Those are going to improve over time. So FSD is going to be critical for the growth of this business. You think of that recurring revenue. 100,000 Tesla drivers in North America had access to FSD beta. So that's pretty impressive. Vehicle software talks about battery manufacturing. They're making new battery technology for next year's models, it sounds like. Solar deployments increased 25% year over year, the strongest quarterly result in 4 years. So that was impressive to see. You can see some of the numbers over here in solar. So volume, they plan to grow their manufacturing capacity as quick as possible. Over a multi-year horizon, we expect to achieve 50%, again, annual growth rate in vehicle deliveries. Got some photos of the teams. We actually have a couple of members that are in our Discord that work for Tesla. Maybe they're even on one of these pictures. 200,000 vehicles produced in Fremont. We got Berlin here. We've got another Berlin, the paint shop. We've got Gigafactory Texas. You got the Tesla on top. So when you fly over, you can see Tesla. It's pretty cool. The body shop in Texas. Here's the Shanghai exterior. You've got the general assembly in Shanghai, and so on. This is something new, predictive vision-based seatbelt tensioning. So what this does is the car can sense if there's going to be impact, and it starts to put tension on the seatbelt before impact. You think of traditional seatbelts, it doesn't actually tighten up till you've already made impact, and that can cause problems and injuries. So this is something new they're working on, pretty interesting to bring up. as of right now, the stock's up about 7%, nearing $800 a share. Now the high on this was $1,243 back November 4th, 2021. Right, this says 89P ratio. If you look at it on Google, it's actually 107P ratio. You can see down here, $821 billion market cap. I think this is accurate, 107P ratio. So the P ratio actually had an increase. In other words, it's not as favorable as it was before earnings. What we've seen the last several earnings, we've seen the P ratio actually drop. So in other words, they're doing so well that the price to earnings ratio is going lower. In this case, it wasn't a knockout quarter by any means, and the P ratio actually spiked up back over 107. So I've got some notes here, guys. These are some of my favorite highlights from the earnings call. This is Elon Musk talking. He talked about potential for record-breaking second half of the year. FSD beta, we mentioned earlier, over 100,000 owners. FSD is 35 million miles. That's more than anyone combined, any other car manufacturer combined. 5 to 6 years ago, they said they want to be the best manufacturer in the world, and that is their competitive advantage. So when you think of that competitive advantage being the best manufacturer and having higher margins than your competition, when those margins start to squeeze, like we just saw in this quarter, that decreases or dilutes their competitive advantage. So that's something to keep in mind, something to note. That's one of the negatives. If you have the bear case, that'd be one of the negatives, that if the margins go, continue to go lower, then they're going to lose some of that competitive advantage. If you look at safety team, we talked about tensions in the seatbelt. I already showed you that. Focus on Cybertruck readiness right now. Production middle of next year. They're hoping to actually have production middle of next year and start doing deliveries. Maybe our best product ever is what he said on the call when he talked about the Cybertruck. And then FSD beta to all North American customers by the end of this year. That's their plan. So they actually have it rolled out to all North American customers, FSD, by the end of this year. Also Europe pending approval. Now, when you think of FSD, it's $199. They talked about on the call, they want to increase the price of that. Now, $200 a month, what Elon said on the call is that it's really cheap if you understand what it is. Now, if that price keeps going up, even at $200, if you have millions of people paying $200 a month, that's every single month, that's recurring revenue. Now you have kind of like a software as a service, a subscription service where you have that recurring revenue, and that's going to strengthen the bull case significantly for Tesla. This is a really interesting quote from Elon on the call, talking about EV manufacturers, so Chinese EV manufacturers. I have a lot of respect for Chinese EV manufacturers. I think they'll be a force to be reckoned with worldwide. They're smart and hardworking, and I think anyone who is not competitive with them will suffer a market share decline. He talked about auto pricing and talked about long-term how they'd like to see inflation come down and maybe lower prices. They anticipate inflation to start to come down by the end of this year. And it says here, if we see indicators of decline in inflation, Tesla would lower prices. And then later he said, I can't guarantee anything, but we'd consider lowering prices. You know how that stuff goes. Depends on macroeconomic conditions. I think inflation, this is a quote, Elon says, I think inflation will decline towards the end of this year. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, but he urged entrepreneurs to enter the lithium refining business. The mining is easy, he said. The refining is much harder. Lithium is common, but it has to be refined. And he said there's basically software margins in lithium processing right now. You can't lose. It's a license to print money. Another quote from the call, Elon said, cryptocurrency is a sideshow to the sideshow. Musk also talked about his 3 pillars for sustainable energy future. So he's talking about solar and wind energy generation is 1, stationary battery packs for storage of this power is 2, and then electric vehicles is the 3rd. This next piece here, guys, this is a risk to Tesla's business. I'm actually going to play the audio from the earnings call. Listen to this.
How do you feel the progress of FSD is going, and does Andrej Karpathy's leaving have any significant impact on timelines or potential progress?
Well, since Andrej was writing all the code by himself, naturally things would come to a grinding halt. Insert irony. Andrej's obviously Andrej's awesome, and we have tremendous amount of respect for Andrej. He's decided to. I think he wants to contribute more to core AI at an academic level, and get back to coding individually. So, but we've got a team of about 120 people in our software AI group that are extremely talented, and I think we will I'm highly confident we will solve full self-driving, and it still seems to be this year. I know people, they're like, always says that, but it does seem to be it does seem as though we're converging on solving full self-driving this year.
Now, one of the analyst questions asked about demand. They saw a slowdown in demand for Tesla vehicles and where they thought they might be by the end of this year. Listen to this.
The next question comes from Emmanuel Rosner from Deutsche Bank. Emmanuel, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have a question on your vehicle demand and then a quick follow-up on supply. First, on the demand side, are you seeing any sort of pressure in the order book or the pace of new order, or any sort of slowdown as a result of the pressures that the consumer is experiencing? Are you worried about it in light of your view of the risk to the economy that I think you expressed, Elon?
Well, right now our problem is very much production. So we have long leads on, as anyone can tell if they order our car. I think you order a Model Y, it will arrive sometime next year. So this is clearly not an issue for many months for us. Our problem is overwhelmingly that of production.
Okay.
Maybe just two things to add. Specifically on your question, are we seeing a macroeconomic impact on our demand? Not that I can. Very long runway, but with very long lead times here. I mean, certainly the world is uncertain, and we'll have to see where things go with commodity prices, how quickly we're ramping production, what the state of the world looks like at some point next year. But the demand is not something we spend really any time talking about.
So when you think of pros and cons, bear and bull case for Tesla, we went through some of this along the way. But when you think about Tesla, one of their huge differentiators is the fact that they have higher margins and that they're more efficient and they can manufacture more efficiently. And they have competitive advantages with battery cell technology and so on. Another positive is going to be FSD when you think of that recurring revenue from the autonomous driving. Now, if gross margins continue to compress, that's going to be a negative for Tesla, and that could impact the competitive advantage. At this point, I don't see any issues. I think they've navigated the storm very well when you consider the complexities of their supply chain and how they've managed that by increasing prices and doing their best. And they said on the call, if our suppliers can't fix a problem, we're going to do it ourselves. So they're committed. If they need to be vertically integrated, they'll do that to make sure that they're getting the best product, the best price possible. So when they're increasing prices, it's not to stick it to the person that's buying it. They're just trying to keep the investors in mind, the shareholders in mind, and not that let those gross margins slip. Now to talk about the Bitcoin in a little bit more detail, they had $1.5 billion of Bitcoin, but they sold 75% of it. So over $1 billion they sold, and they converted that into fiat currency. So this is significant. It impacted their balance sheet in a positive way. And without that cash, it might have been an issue, maybe not. It's hard to say. You saw they have $18 billion in cash. Now, just a few months ago, it seems like yesterday, Musk made a comment that he had a super bad feeling about the economy, and Tesla, of course, had some layoffs. Also, he had a quote here, Texas and Germany gigafactories, Musk said their furnaces burning money. Now, of course, when you think of it as an investor, you want to have growth, and it's going to cost money to get that growth. So they're investing in these gigafactories because they need production. The demand is there, but they have to be able to produce enough vehicles to keep up with demand, and that's why they're burning all this cash. But those comments, if you can, you can take those out of context, and they can be very bearish comments. So Tesla really needs to focus on production, producing as many vehicles as possible, as efficiently as possible, especially these new gigafactories they have, and that's going to help with that cash burn. That's going to help with those margins we talked about earlier, and so on. Another thing to note, according to the White House memo from June 28th, Tesla also plans to begin production of new supercharger equipment that will enable non-Tesla EV drivers in North America to use Tesla superchargers. Next, we're going to look at a chart. Before we do that, I want to announce this video is sponsored by the Motley Fool. If you want to see the 10 best stocks to buy now, visit fool.com/firedupwealth. And I want to remind you guys that Motley Fool does not tell me what to say. They don't tell me what videos to make. They're a great partner. Go check those guys out. Now, as we're talking, the stock keeps going higher. It's above $800 now at $806. We had chart day yesterday in Patreon Discord. We said bull case, if earnings were good, we'd see 750 plus. Well, we're already above 800, guys. So we're up here. This first resistance line is going to be right around 813. This 200-day moving average, the simple moving average is 823, 825. So Could it get up to that level? Probably. It bottomed out around $620. I personally was buying in the 600s. You can see anything in orange is kind of previous chart day. We said we'd love to see 600s. It got down to $620 in that range. And we were buying that in Patreon Discord. If you want to check out our Discord Patreon, visit patreon.com/fired up wealth. But right now the stock's looking pretty bullish. Probably a lot of traders piling in. It's $807.50. Just be careful chasing this. But, again, if it breaks this 200-day moving average, it could extend, especially over this R3 at 863. Could it go to $1,000 by the end of the year? It's very possible. I know some of you are listening to this and that you're bears on Tesla. In fact, you're probably not listening because you wouldn't have watched this long. So you're just bulls left. So if you want my case on it, I'm a Tesla bull. I think this is going to be worth a lot more in 5 years. I do understand there's risk. I understand that not everybody gets the company because they want to compare it to Ford and GM. This is a technology company. This is an AI company. What I think is exciting is the FSD. When I start thinking about $200 and $300 a month recurring revenue, now we're looking at a software as a service type business, and that's right down my alley. I think Elon Musk is a great leader. That's also a risk if something happens to Elon Musk. So it's one of those companies, one of these stocks that you either love it or you hate it. I'm in the camp that I'm a bull of Tesla. I bought this in 2020 before the split. I've done very well, and I'm continuing to add on the dips like I did recently in the $600. So if you like this video, guys, help me out. Drop me a like, drop me a comment. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe. Click that bell to get notifications. I appreciate your time and attention. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.